Throughout World War II, approximately 3.4 million tons of bombs were dropped on Europe, thousands of aircraft, thousands of sorties, 6 years of continuous bombing, and now, on August 6, 1945, the same result was achieved by a single aircraft in 43 seconds. With just one bomb dropped, 80,000 people ceased to exist in a matter of seconds. Shadows remained on the steps after the explosion, dark silhouettes of people sitting on the steps at the moment of detonation. People vanished instantly. The heat wave vaporized them faster than the stone had time to heat up, and 3 days later, another 40,000 died in another city before the catastrophe. By 1945, World War II was already drawing to a close in Europe. Germany had surrendered in May, but in the Pacific Theater, the Japanese army continued to fight with such intensity that the American command seriously considered a ground invasion of the Japanese islands, an operation codenamed Downfall, and according to Pentagon estimates, it could have cost between 250,000 and 1 million American lives, not counting Japanese casualties. By 1945, Japan was already effectively defeated, its fleet had been destroyed, cities were burning from conventional bombing raids, and in March 1945, approximately 2,000 tons of incendiary bombs were dropped on Tokyo in a single night. At the same time, starting in 1942, the top-secret Manhattan Project was underway in the United States, involving more than 130,000 people and costing about $2 billion. It was the largest scientific military undertaking in history. Physicists from Europe who had fled Nazism, American scientists, military engineers, all under the leadership of physicist Robert Oppenheimer in New Mexico. On July 16, 1945, the world's first nuclear test detonation was conducted at Trinity with a yield of about 20 kilotons in TNT equivalent. Oppenheimer would later say that at that moment, he recalled a line from the Indian epic, "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The initial list included Kyoto, Hiroshima, Kokura, Nagasaki, and several other cities. Hiroshima was chosen as the first target. In 1945, Hiroshima was a city with a population of about 350,000, an important military and administrative center. It housed the headquarters of the Second Army and large supply depots, which is precisely why it made the list. At the same time, the city had hardly been subjected to conventional bombing before, which was also intentional. The Americans wanted to keep it intact so that the destruction caused by the atomic bomb would be obvious and not confused with previous damage. Disaster, Hiroshima. August 6, 1945, 8:17 a.m. Local time, a B-29 aircraft named Enola Gay, after the mother of the pilot, Colonel Paul Tibbets, took off from Tinian Island that night, accompanied by 2 escort planes, one carrying instruments, the other photographic equipment. The bomb was called Little Boy. It was a uranium bomb, about 3 meters long and weighing 4 tons. Its yield was approximately 15 kilotons. At the moment of the explosion, the temperature at the epicenter reached several million degrees Celsius. For comparison, the surface temperature of the sun is about 5,500 degrees. A fireball with a diameter of about 280 meters formed in less than a second. Thermal radiation within a radius of approximately 2 kilometers from the epicenter was so intense that people outdoors suffered fatal burns in a fraction of a second. Clothing caught fire, skin peeled off in sheets. The shadows of people and objects were literally imprinted on walls and steps, because the radiation bleached the surface wherever there was no barrier. The shockwave arrived about a second after the flash. It traveled at a speed far exceeding the speed of sound. The pressure at the epicenter was about 8 atmospheres. To put that in perspective, 1 atmosphere is the pressure of atmospheric air at sea level. Japanese-style houses, wooden, lightweight, within a radius of 1.5 kilometers were swept away instantly. Concrete structures withstood the blast, but everything inside them was destroyed. The reinforced concrete dome of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, standing almost directly at the epicenter, was partially preserved. Today, it is known as the Atomic Dome and is listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. After the shockwave, a firestorm began. Fires broke out simultaneously throughout the city, creating powerful updrafts that sucked in oxygen and people from the surrounding area. The temperature at the center of the firestorm reached several hundred degrees. The rivers, to which people fled for safety, were boiling. Documentary evidence records thousands of bodies in the water. Of Hiroshima's approximately 76,000 buildings, about 70,000 were destroyed or severely damaged. Survival was virtually impossible within a 1.6-kilometer radius of the epicenter. The city's medical services were paralyzed. Of Hiroshima's 150 doctors, 65 died. Of 1,780 nurses, 1,654 were killed or wounded. About 20 to 30 minutes after the explosion, the so-called Black Rain began to fall over the city. Radioactive particles lifted into the atmosphere mixed with water vapor and fell as a dark, oily liquid with a high concentration of radionuclides. People who drank this water or were simply caught in the rain received doses of radiation that killed them in the weeks and months. Nagasaki. 3 days later, August 9, 1945, the Japanese command had not yet fully grasped what had happened in Hiroshima. On August 8th, Soviet troops had declared war on Japan and launched an offensive in Manchuria. This placed serious additional pressure on Tokyo. On that day, the original target was not Nagasaki. The first target was Kokura, a major arsenal, but Kokura was obscured by thick cloud cover. The B-29 bomber, Boxcar, approached the target 3 times and was unable to make a precision drop, after which it headed for the alternate target, Nagasaki. There was cloud cover there as well, and the order to return had almost been given when a break in the clouds appeared. It was at that very moment that the navigator spotted the industrial area and made the drop. The Fat Man bomb was a plutonium bomb and more powerful, about 21 kilotons, but the destruction in Nagasaki turned out to be somewhat less than in Hiroshima. Paradoxically, the mountains surrounding the city limited the spread of the shock wave. The epicenter was in the Urakami Valley rather than the city center, which slightly reduced the number of civilian casualties in the central districts. But for the Urakami district itself, this made no difference. It was completely destroyed, including Asia's largest Catholic cathedral, the Urakami Cathedral, where Mass was being held at the time of the explosion. The death toll in Nagasaki ranged from 40,000 to 80,000 by the end of 1945, while official figures for Hiroshima vary depending on the counting methodology, from 70,000 to 140,000 by the end of 1945. After the catastrophe. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito of Japan addressed the nation in a radio broadcast, the first time in history that ordinary Japanese people heard their emperor's voice. He announced the acceptance of the terms of the Potsdam Declaration, that is, unconditional surrender. The word surrender was not mentioned in the text of the address. He said that the war is not necessarily going in Japan's favor. The formal surrender was signed on September 2, 1945. Radiation sickness became the second killer. Those who survived the blast and the first few hours began dying of acute radiation sickness within a few weeks. Symptoms: hair loss, bleeding from the mouth, nose, and under the skin, bone marrow destruction, damage to internal organs. Medicine in 1945 had no effective treatments for radiation sickness. People died in hospitals without understanding the cause. Survivors in Japan faced long-term stigmatization. They were shunned in the job market and denied marriage. Considered contaminated, many hid their status as hibakusha for their entire lives. This, too, is part of the catastrophe that is not visible in photographs. Conclusion: both cities were rebuilt. By 1958, Hiroshima had restored its pre-war population, and today it is a modern city with Peace Park at the epicenter of the blast and a memorial museum that attracts over 1 million visitors annually. The last officially recognized hibakusha passed away in 2024. The community of survivors is effectively fading away with time, and their testimonies are being archived. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki remain the only instances of nuclear weapons being used in military operations in human history, and this is precisely what defines their special status. Not merely military history, not merely casualty statistics. It is the point beyond which the very concept of war took on a new dimension, because it became clear, now weapons can destroy not just an army or a city, but the very conditions for the existence of civilization, and humanity has been living with this new reality ever since.